I'm EZRAH, here to talk you through the day's burning issues and the biggest stories. Welcome to the Manila Times. Gaslighting and denial. That is the newest diplomatic strategy of China in an attempt to diffuse tensions on the long-disputed Ayungin Shoal in the West Philippine Sea, where a Chinese vessel pointed military-grade lasers towards a Philippine Coast Guard vessel. Allegedly, they also made dangerous maneuvers to block the Philippine fleet from delivering supplies. Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Wang Xilian, reiterated yesterday that the Chinese Coast Guard meant no harm. The PCG earlier reported that the lasers used caused temporary blindness to Filipino crew, which the Department of Foreign Affairs later used as a basis for lodging a diplomatic protest against Beijing last week. The allegations were rebuffed by Chinese Foreign Ministry Wang Wenbin, saying they were just using handheld lasers to protect in what was theirs, and I quote, a professional and restrained way. Several countries have backed the Philippines in their filing of a diplomatic protest. President Marcos summoned Chinese ambassador immediately after the incident. Here to tell us more is Philippine Coast Guard Commodore J.T. Tarriela, advisor of the Commandant and spokesperson on the West Philippine Sea Concerns. Good day to you, sir, and welcome to the Manila Times. So, sir, first and foremost, we'd like you to tell us about the account on February 6 for everyone who's watching. What really transpired on the laser incident?
The Philippine Coast Guard vessel BRP Malapascua, or MRV 4403, was tasked to support the supply and rotation of personnel of the Armed Forces of the Philippines who are detailed in BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal. And when we are about to come close with a distance of 10 nautical miles from Ayungin Shoal, the Chinese Coast Guard vessels did a lot of dangerous maneuvers, also contacted our radio warning us that we are entering their territory at the jurisdiction of the People's Republic of China. And in response, the Philippine Coast Guard vessel also challenged the China Coast Guard vessel and saying that Ayungin Shoal falls under the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines. But they also used military-grade lasers to point it to our crew at the bridge of the Philippine Coast Guard vessel. When you say bridge, this is actually the operational center of the Philippine Coast Guard vessel. So try to imagine our crew experienced temporary blindness from 10 to 15 seconds. So in short, it jeopardized the safety of our crew in navigating these dangerous waters in the South China Sea.
Sir, with this account, the Philippine government immediately filed a diplomatic protest, and they had no reason to deny the experience of the Coast Guard. But then China, Wang Xilian as well as Wang Wenbin have denied what happened at the encounter near Ayungin Shoal, saying it was not true and it was not aggressive. So what do you say to this, sir?
Well, first of all, the Philippine Coast Guard will not make up stories. We're not going to lie that our Coast Guard sailors experience temporary blindness. Second, if they're claiming that the laser that they use towards the Philippine Coast Guard vessel is not military grade, I think it's up to the public to judge based on the videos, the photos that we release to the public. As you can see, you can look at the intensity of the laser light that used to point at us. If they're also saying that is only employed for navigational safety, that is measure the distance, speed, and the bearing of the Philippine Coast Guard vessel, I think it's very hard also for us to believe that because they have radars. Through radar equipment on board, you can actually know all this data. Lastly, I'm not really sure whether that kind of laser that they're claiming to be not a military grade can be made available online.
Aside from this laser incident last year, sir, or earlier, there was already a water cannon incident wherein a Chinese vessel fired water cannons to the Philippine Coast Guard. My question to you, sir, is how will the Coast Guard react for any more forms of intimidation from China on the disputed waters of the West Philippine Sea? This may not be the last as well. So how will you respond in the future?
The Philippine Coast Guard always base its actions, particularly in the West Philippine Sea, on the rules on the use of force. which is being updated, formulated by the National Task Force West Philippine Sea. We have a set of rules on how are we going to respond with different threats towards a Philippine Coast Guard vessel. So for now, we are currently reviewing and formulating new procedures as to how are we going to respond to laser pointing again or any other forms of harassment that the Chinese Coast Guard will do. It's also important for us to note that the US government and the Japanese government are also helping the capability of the Philippine Coast Guard. We have yet to receive operational inputs. How are we going to define our procedures and responding to this kind of aggression from the Chinese? It's an open book that we don't have that kind of laser technology here in the Philippines. So we might still be needing inputs from our allies, particularly from the United States.
Does the Philippine Coast Guard have a certain guidelines on that? So what would you call an actual act of aggression?
Well, EZRAH, no? For the Coast Guard, we are guided by the rules on the use of force. For the Armed Forces of the Philippines or our military vessels, they are guided by the rules of engagement. As to how are we going to label this kind of harassment from the Chinese, I'm leaving that terminology to the Department of National Defense and to the Department of Foreign Affairs, whether they're going to level this as an act of aggression or those kind of military offensive action. But as far as the Coast Guard is concerned, we are just calling it as an harassment or just a provocative action. Whether it's an offensive military, it's not for us to say.
So where do you draw the line, sir? For example, this is hanggang dito lang.
If we're going to base it from the line that they're going to cross, an armed attack towards the government vessel is a line that would really define a military offensive action. That would already be an attack to the state. But if we're just going to talk about this laser pointing, using water cannon, dangerous maneuvers, and different kind of sorts that harasses us at sea, these are still, just forms of harassment.
China continues to deny this incident. Chinese Ambassador Wang Xilian to the Philippines says this was not an attack, as well as Foreign Ministry Wang Wenbin says this was a professional and restrained way. So they are denying any form of attack on this. So what is the Philippine Coast Guard's final stance on this? Do you just let go of the matter?
As what our DFA spokesperson mentioned yesterday, the national government, the Department of Foreign Affairs, supports the narrative of the Coast Guard of the Philippine Coast Guard. We are not making up stories. We are not lying that our crew experienced temporary blindness. There is no reason for us to make up stories. Their assertion that the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines belongs to them is already a lie. So why would we even believe on those other statements that they're going to say after that?
How is the Coast Guard preparing for any form of intimidation, even aggression towards a Philippine Coast Guard vessel? So how are you preparing for that, sir?
The Philippine Coast Guard is always in close coordination with the Armed Forces of the Philippines and other significant agencies who belong to the National Task Force West Philippine Sea and the Department of Foreign Affairs as well. In any types of aggression that in any types of harassment that they're going to do towards the Philippine Coast Guard vessel, we are going to document it. We are going to use it as a tool for us to support our diplomatic protests every time that we are being harassed.
Thank you so much, sir. Advisor of the Commandant and spokesperson on the West Philippine Sea Concerns, Philippine Coast Guard Commodore JT Tarriela. Sir, thank you so much for your time and for your insights.
Thank you, EZRAH.